Chapter 1. Judith found herself in an endless fields of ripened wheat, their golden stalks stretching toward the heavens. The sun bore down with an unforgiving intensity, casting relentless waves of heat across the fields. Its scorching rays a continually grim force that could not be escaped. Why is it so hot? It's not supposed to be this hot. A gentle breeze brushed against her sweat-drenched face, causing the heads of wheat to dance briefly. In the far distance behind her the sky had turned black, a storm in full force. Judith could see her husband toiling tirelessly in what felt like a furnace, his sweat-soaked brow glistening in the harsh light. David was the pillar of their family, a source of strength and love. Something isn't right. What is it? It wasn't like this before. As she watched him, his laughter faded, replaced by agonized gasps for breath. His once clear eyes now seemed clouded as his movements became sluggish, and he stumbled as if his strength had been drained away. Desperation clawed at Judith's heart as she watched her beloved husband collapse. She rushed to his side, passing through the shade of a lone tree in the field, her voice a trembling whisper as she called out his name. Her pleas for mercy were drowned in the oppressive heat, the land bearing witness to a tragedy that would forever scar her soul. Suddenly, the dark storm surrounded her. The storm, what is this? It shouldn't have been here, the storm doesn't fit. Judith. The dream began to unravel, the intense heat giving way to the cool night air, and Sarah's gentle voice broke through the haze of sorrow. She softly called Judith's name. Sarah, Judith's handmaid, had been sleeping in the next room. As the dream of David and the storm faded, and the waking world came into focus, Judith felt herself jolted awake, her chest heaving with the lingering dread of the nightmare. The room, dimly lit by a single oil lamp, offered solace from the haunting visions of the dream world. Sarah, her face filled with concern, approached Judith. You were having a nightmare. Was it the same dream? Judith, her chest still tight with the memory of the dream, nodded slowly. It was awful, Sarah. I saw David collapse in the fields, and I couldn't save him. The heat was unforgivable. Only this time there was a ferocious storm looming in the distance, and just as David collapsed, the storm was upon me. Judith had been having this dream or some variation of it every day this week. Sarah offered a reassuring hand on Judith's shoulder. Dreams can be strange and unsettling, but they're just dreams, aren't they? You know David's passing wasn't your fault. The death of David had shaken the entire community. He was a man of great wealth and influence, leaving behind a vast estate and many devoted servants, including Sarah. Then, before leaving the room, Sarah gave Judith a comforting hug. As Judith sat in the gentle glow of the lamp, she welcomed the memory of a chilly winter evening, trying to push the dream from her head. She recalled a night when an unexpected frost had descended upon Bethulia, casting a bitter chill over the town. People hurriedly gathered firewood, and hearths burned brightly throughout the community. Yet, in their home, they faced a problem. Their dwindling supply of firewood wasn't enough to last the night. David went outside into the frosty night, gathering large rocks from their garden. Judith watched curiously as he arranged the rocks around the hearth, explaining that the fire would heat the stones, and then radiate warmth long into the night. Their modest home soon glowed with steady warmth, and Judith marveled at David's ingenuity. As Judith reflected on this memory, a smile tugged at her lips. Oh, how she missed him. David's ability to find ingenious solutions to life's unexpected challenges had always been a source of inspiration and reassurance. She hoped that even just a small part of his spirit lived on in her. Despite her husband's passing, Judith's heart remained steadfast, anchored by a belief that God could offer her strength in times of grief. Her faith was a guiding light, fueling her determination. She was a woman of remarkable beauty and unwavering devotion. Her raven hair cascaded gracefully around her shoulders, and her eyes, like pools of deep contemplation, seemed to hold a wisdom that surpassed her years, a wisdom born of trial and faith. Morning arrived slowly after the unsettling dream. Judith rose earlier than usual and made her way to a small olive grove nestled in the heart of Bethulia. This grove was the epicenter of Bethulia's festivities, hosting all major celebrations. In the early morning, it belonged to her alone. The grove was her sanctuary, her sacred place. Here, beneath the ancient, gnarled olive trees, she knelt daily in prayer, offering gratitude for God's blessings. Today, still shaken by her dream, Judith concluded her gentle plea, feeling a tender breeze caress her face like a divine touch, brushing away her tears. The leaves of a bush rustled as a small rabbit moved within it, seemingly in harmony with her whispered words. In that moment, a profound peace enveloped her heart, of promise amid encroaching darkness, and memories of Passover flooded her mind. As a child, Judith stood beside her parents during the solemn eve of Passover, near the sacred olive grove, where villagers gathered to celebrate and reflect on their ancestors' liberation from Egypt. The air was filled with the sweet scent of freshly baked matzah, and villagers prepared offerings of lamb and bitter herbs. They offered heartfelt prayers of gratitude for their ancestors' freedom from bondage and blessings upon their village. Judith's father, a man of unwavering faith, held her tiny hand and whispered words of reverence, teaching her to connect with God. As the villagers prayed, Judith's father plucked a ripe olive from the tree and held it gently in his hand. With deep reverence, he offered a prayer of thanksgiving for the cherished freedom they enjoyed. As the prayer continued, Judith noticed a small rabbit, its tiny form trembling with fear at the approach of a fox. The rabbit seemed trapped, and the fox was ready to pounce. In a miraculous twist of fate, a stone hit the fox, causing it to flee in a startled dash. Judith's father had picked up a smooth stone from the ground, and with careful aim, he hurled the stone at the fox. The rabbit, miraculously unharmed and saved from the jaws of danger, scampered away to safety. Judith's father turned to his daughter with a smile of awe and wonder. Did you see Judith? He whispered, his voice filled with reverence. Just as our ancestors were delivered from bondage, so too was this small creature saved from the grasp of its oppressor. The rabbit represents us, vulnerable yet resilient, and the fox symbolizes our adversaries. Today is Passover. We are reminded of God's presence and of the roles we must play to protect our freedom and the freedom of others. Judith nodded, her young heart filled with the profound message of the moment. In that simple yet extraordinary act, she found a deeper understanding of the meaning of Passover and her role in ensuring the safety and freedom of her people. As the memory faded and Judith's mind returned to the present, a lone little rabbit passed by beneath the ancient olive trees, whispering promises of hope and freedom. Far from the serene olive grove and its sacred whispers, in the shadow of the towering Assyrian camp, General Holofernes stood at the forefront of a vast army. Under his command, he orchestrated impending doom for all those who withheld support from Nebuchadnezzar in his last war. Around him, soldiers and allies from distant lands prepared to march once again. 170,000 infantry and 12,000 cavalry strong, they cast a terrifying shadow over the land. The weight of ambition bore heavily on Holo, his desire for fame and recognition a relentless force within him. As he surveyed the destruction before him, he couldn't help but reflect on the path that had led him here. The power he wielded, the devastation he had wrought, it was intoxicating. His pursuit of fame and recognition was unrelenting, born from a desire to rise above his station and achieve his master's orders of annihilation. He remembered his youth when he was just a simple soldier striving for recognition, the faces of his comrades, and the battles they had fought together. He was always an ambitious soldier, driven to rise above his station. The walls that once protected you, he began, his voice a twisted shout of jubilation, now lie shattered and broken. The streets, once bustling with life, are now littered with the fallen. Your cries for mercy drowned in the relentless roar of flames. His words painted a gruesome picture of Zephic's demise, and he reveled in it. Fear clung to the captives like a suffocating shroud, their eyes wide with terror, and their bodies trembling. They knew that their lives hung by the thinnest of threads, subject to the whims of the merciless general. The sounds of grunted agreement could be heard around him as his war council and guards stomped their feet. Their hearts were as cold and unforgiving as their leaders, and they reveled in the suffering they had wrought upon these people. Their celebratory laughter formed a grotesque chorus that echoed through the desolation. The largest captive was a round and feeble figure, his once strong frame softened by captivity. His shoulders slumped, and he moved slowly, weighed down by despair. His clothes hung loosely, and his pallid cheeks revealed the toll of suffering, making him appear vulnerable and defeated. He pleaded, "Please, General, show compassion. We are at your mercy. Spare our lives." Indeed, the general's words are true, Asher declared. Our actions have demonstrated our resolve, and the might of Assyria and Nebuchadnezzar stands unassailable. His words were a rallying cry, and his fellow commanders and soldiers nodded in agreement. General Ferns turned to the captives, lifting the largest up by his clothing and pulling him close. Then, in a swift motion, he drew his blade and plunged it into the man's stomach, a sickening sound accompanying the act. Zephic was just the beginning. Soon, Bethulia will meet the same fate, and the world will tremble before us. Now be gone. Leave this place and carry the message to others. The might of Assyria and Nebuchadnezzar is unstoppable. Tell them General Holofernes is coming. As the day's captives trembled and cautiously began to move, Asher, the commander of the Ammonites, raised his foot and used it to shove a captive to the ground, hissing, "Go. Quickly, before we change our minds." The fear in their eyes clung to them like a relentless shadow as they stumbled and ran from the camp. As the captives fled, Holofernes watched them go, his mind already racing with plans for the destruction of Bethulia. Asher remained by his side, a trusted advisor and confidant, ready to assist in executing their dark ambitions. "General." It was one of the guards near the entrance to the tent. "The Ammonite spies have taken a prisoner from Bethulia. Bring him in." He turned to Asher and winked, as if to say, "Watch this." The prisoner was brought in, looking like as calm as if he were tending to his fields. This didn't sit well with Holo. He approached the captive, his eyes cold and calculating. "Aren't you afraid?" Holo inquired, his voice like steel. "Don't you see the destruction around you? I did this. Your humble town of Bethulia is next. What makes you think I can't do to your home, your wife, and your children what I did to so many here?" The prisoner, his face etched with a mixture of fear and defiance, stammered in response, "You are not fighting against us. You are fighting our God. He shall deliver us from your grasp, but even if he doesn't save us, you seal your own fate." Holo's lips curled into a chilling smile, a glimpse of his ruthless nature. "God," he mused, "I am sent by Nebuchadnezzar, protected by the God of wisdom himself. We shall see if your God withstands the coming storm." But just then, Asher stepped forward, and in a calm, measured tone, he began to speak of the history of the Israelites, their struggles, and their devotion to their God. He spoke of their escape from Egypt and how they had conquered the land and the cities that were here before. As the prisoner listened to Asher's words, a glimmer of hope crossed his eyes. He turned to Holo and said, "General, please consider the history of my people. Our strength comes from our unwavering faith and commitment to the laws of our God. If we have sinned, let our God be the judge. He has led us to victory before, and as long as we remain true to our covenant, I suspect he will again." Holo's expression shifted as he weighed the words of both the prisoner and Asher. Doubt crept into his mind, a nagging question about the consequences of his actions and the power of faith. The fate of the captive and the destiny of the Assyrian campaign hung in a precarious balance, uncertainty threading through the air like an invisible, unsettling fog. Amidst the serene fields of Bethulia, a battered and bruised man staggered through the narrow paths that led to the peaceful town. His eyes bore witness to unspeakable horrors, and his trembling form bespoke the treacherous journey from Zephic. Every step he took was fueled by a determination to deliver a dire message to Bethulia. Must warn Holofernes, coming, he croaked, his voice barely audible, catching the attention of laborers toiling in the fields. They hurried to his side, offering water and shelter. Word of the man's arrival swiftly circulated around Bethulia. He was one of 5 captives from the razed city of Zephic, brought low by the relentless advance of General Holofernes. As the grim news settled, faces in the crowd contorted with disbelief, and hushed conversations filled the air, revealing the creeping fear that had taken hold. Judith was irresistibly drawn to the commotion, her heart a heavy anchor in her chest. She couldn't ignore the distress etched upon the man's face, nor the contagious fear that gripped the townsfolk. As she joined the gathering crowd, lines of worry deepened on her face, mirroring the collective concern that had settled over Bethulia like a suffocating shroud. Yet, within the depths of her concerned gaze, a spark of unwavering determination flickered. With each passing moment, the shadow of impending peril loomed larger, casting a foreboding pall over the once serene town. But Judith refused to waver, for she believed that their God could and would shield them from the impending storm. An urgent assembly was convened within the city's chamber. The council members, seated around a large table, were a diverse group comprising elders, scholars, and military commanders, all bound by their unwavering commitment to the city's survival. The survivor, his voice trembling with exhaustion and fear, recounted the horrors he had witnessed in Zephic. His words painted a vivid picture of destruction, sending shivers through the council members. He described the relentless advance of General Holofernes and his vast army, their merciless siege tactics, and the chilling warning issued by the ruthless general. The council listened in grim silence, their faces etched with concern, the weight of the impending crisis bearing down upon them. With urgency, Eli, the head of the council, cut through the room's tension with a determined gaze that demanded attention. His voice, though firm, carried a hint of concern. "We must not underestimate the looming threat," he began, his voice resonating with gravitas. "General Furness is a conqueror driven by insatiable ambition, his loyalty to Nebuchadnezzar unwavering. It's evident he seeks nothing less than our total annihilation." Gideon, a seasoned military commander, leaned forward, his weathered brow furrowing with resolve. "Our defenses demand fortification," he stated firmly, "and our people must brace for the inevitable siege. The might of Assyria cannot be underestimated. Our primary concern must be the passes leading to the hill country. By closing these vital routes with our bravest soldiers, we can effectively halt General Furness's advance into our lands." Miriam, while voicing her concerns, couldn't help but wonder if their resources could truly withstand such a blockade. "While closing off the passes may buy us time," she warned, "we must be prepared for the toll it will exact on our resources and people." Elijah raised a critical concern. "Water is our lifeblood," he emphasized. "If General Ferns cuts off our access to it, we face doom. Our defenders must prioritize safeguarding our water sources, and we should consider constructing additional reservoirs within the city as a precaution." Naomi offered her insights. "To execute this strategy," she explained, "we must gather our most skilled and resolute warriors, positioning them strategically to deter any incursion. Furthermore, messengers should be dispatched to neighboring settlements, seeking their support in these dire times. Scouts must venture forth to gather intelligence on the Assyrian army's movements." Ezra voiced his concerns about the defensive strategy, his words measured and thoughtful. "While I understand the need for fortification," he cautioned, "we mustn't overlook the possibility of negotiations. An outright blockade may provoke an even more aggressive response from General Ferns. Perhaps sending an emissary to establish a line of communication is worth considering." Miriam agreed with Ezra's point. "Ezra makes a valid point," she remarked. "Opening a line of communication with General Furness could offer an opportunity for negotiation and, potentially, the avoidance of a disastrous conflict." After thorough deliberation, the council reached a consensus. Eli, his voice resolute and commanding, delivered their decision. "The defense of our city remains paramount," he asserted, locking eyes with each council member. "Our resources, including water, must be vigilantly safeguarded. By blocking General Holofernes' advance, securing our vital water sources, and sending an emissary to explore diplomatic options, we protect not only our lands but also the very existence of our people." The weight of this decision settled over the room as Eli's gaze landed on Ezra. Eli turned to Ezra. His voice was both resolute and measured. "Ezra, you have spoken of seeking negotiations. It's a path fraught with danger, but if there's a chance for peace, we must explore it. You shall be our envoy of peace." Ezra nodded, his heart heavy with the weight of his mission. "I will go," he affirmed, "and I shall carry our plea for understanding." The council members knew the risks, but they also recognized the potential reward of averting a catastrophic conflict. They made preparations for Ezra's journey, ensuring he was well provisioned for the perilous path ahead. The crowd outside the council chambers had gathered so tightly that the murmur of voices melded into a constant, low hum, and the scent of anxious anticipation hung heavy in the evening air. As night fell, a gentle breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it the cool, crisp scent of impending autumn. Judith was among the crowd that had gathered, her heart heavy with concern, waiting for the council to address the looming threat. She stood amidst the townsfolk, their faces etched with worry as they anxiously anticipated the council's announcement. Eli, the head of the council, addressed the assembly, sharing some of the plans that had been discussed. His words carried the weight of the impending crisis, and the crowd listened attentively, their collective fear hanging in the air. The entire city had been gripped by an overwhelming sense of foreboding. Every resident, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, understood that Bethulia's fate now rested squarely on their shoulders. It wasn't merely a matter of safeguarding their homes. It was a battle for their very existence. The palpable tension in the air weighed heavily on every heart, testing their unity, determination, and their ability to stand as one in the face of an imminent catastrophe. As night fell and the stars emerged in the dark sky, Bethulia stood at the precipice of an uncertain future, its destiny hanging in the balance. Ezra stood in the doorway of his modest home, his heart heavy with the weight of the journey he was about to undertake. He looked back at his wife, Leah, who held their young child in her arms. Tears glistened in her eyes, and her voice trembled as she spoke. "Please, Ezra," Leah implored, her voice barely above a whisper, "promise me you'll return to us safely. Our child needs their father, and I need my husband." Ezra stepped closer to his wife, gently cradling their child's tiny hand in his own. He kissed their child's forehead, his lips lingering for a moment as he whispered a silent prayer for their safety. "I promise, Leah," he said, his voice filled with determination. "I will do everything in my power to return to you both. You are the light of my life, and I cannot bear the thought of being separated from you." Tears flowed freely down Leah's cheeks as she pressed a small pendant into Ezra's hand. It was a family heirloom, a symbol of their love and commitment to each other. She had worn it since the day they were married. "Take this with you," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "May it bring you comfort and protection on your journey." Ezra nodded, his own tears mingling with Leah's. He kissed her one last time, a lingering, passionate kiss filled with unspoken love and longing. Then, with a heavy heart, he turned and walked away from his home, his wife Leah, and his child. As Ezra made his way toward the city gates, accompanied by a small group of determined soldiers, he couldn't shake the feeling of foreboding that clung to him. The weight of his responsibilities, the uncertainty of the mission, and the tearful goodbyes and prayers for a safe return weighed heavily on his shoulders. But he knew that he had to go for the safety of his city, his people, and the ones he loved most in this world. The soldiers stood tall and resolute, their expressions unwavering, fully aware of the weight of their duty and the importance of protecting their envoy. Judith stood among the crowd, her eyes fixed on Ezra as he mounted his horse. Her gaze conveyed her inner turmoil, a sense of fear for the man who was now representing their city in the face of an impending threat. Judith's heart raced, each beat echoing in her chest like a drum of dread. Her hands, clasped together, trembled despite her efforts to steady them. She couldn't tear her eyes away from Ezra, her fear for his safety almost suffocating. Ezra met her gaze, and for a moment, their eyes locked. In that shared look, there was an unspoken understanding of the risks and the importance of his mission. He offered her a reassuring nod before turning his horse and setting off toward the horizon. Meanwhile, elsewhere in Bethulia, soldiers were dispatched to the passes leading to the hill country, their mission clear: create a blockade to deter General Holofern's advance. Another group of soldiers made their way to the city's vital spring, tasked with ensuring its protection. As Ezra set off into the unknown, a sense of foreboding settled over the city. The question that haunted every mind was whether his mission would bring peace or plunge them into a devastating conflict. Only time would reveal the answer, and Bethulia stood on the precipice of an uncertain future.